We will first start with the overview and description of the apparatus. The upstream section of the apparatus is comprised of the supply reservoir and the sluice gate. The sluice gate can be lowered and raised using the crank shown. Water is conveyed from the supply reservoir through the channel. The downstream gate is located at the downstream end of the channel. It is used to control the flow depth downstream. However, it will not be used in this experiment. The discharge reservoir and the V-notch weir are located underneath the channel at the downstream end of the apparatus. Note that the zero reading of the head above the V-notch weir is 24.2 centimeters. The red valve is used to regulate the water flow through the apparatus and is located underneath the middle section of the channel. A piezometer panel is located on the other side of the apparatus, which is facing the wall. There's a graduated sliding scale attached to the panel which assists in recording the piezometer readings. The piezometers used in the experiment are numbered 20 through 24. These piezometers are connected on the upstream face of the sluice gate. Now we will make sure that the apparatus is set up properly before commencing the experiment. First of all, water should be flowing in the channel. The downstream gate should be completely lowered. Using a metallic ruler, make sure that the gate opening is as indicated in the lab manual for the first run. For example, in this demonstration, the gate opening is adjusted to 1 centimeter. Using the scale on the reservoir window, make sure that the water level is at least 35 centimeters and steady. Wait a few minutes for the water level to stabilize. If it is not steady, please contact the teaching assistant to assist you. Be careful that the water level does not overflow the reservoir walls. We will now be going into the procedures of this experiment. The first step is to measure the head above the weir using the calibrated piezometer on the side of the tank. Measure the depth of the water upstream using a metallic ruler. Ensure that the measurement is recorded as close to the gate as possible. At about 30 centimeters downstream of the sluice gate, measure the flow depth of the water using the point gauge. Use the average of the three values. Try to record those measurements where the flow depth is uniform. The procedures for using the point gauge is as follows. This is an illustration of the point gauge and adjustment screws. To measure the flow depth, turn the bottom screw counterclockwise while holding the metal rod with your other hand. Lower the metal rod gently until it reaches the bottom of the channel. Turn the top screw counterclockwise and adjust the left scale until the two zero marks are aligned. Afterwards, tighten the top screw. Raise the metal rod by hand until the very tip of the gauge is just touching the water surface, and then tighten the bottom screw to fix it in place. Use the micro adjustment wheel to fine-tune the tip's elevation in such a way that the tip of the rod is barely touching the water surface. The right scale represents the number before the decimal place. It can be read according to the zero mark on the left scale. The left scale represents the number after the decimal place. It can be read according to the alignment between one of the divisions of the left scale with any of the divisions on the right scale. For example, in this demonstration, the measurement is 7.4 millimeters. At the back of the apparatus, record the piezometer readings for the piezometers of interest. After this, ask the teaching assistant to set the gate height at the second specified opening. Allow ample time for the levels in the upstream reservoir and weir reservoir to stabilize. Note that for a larger gate opening, the water level in the supply reservoir will drop, perhaps to a level below the upper piezometer taps. For the second gate opening, repeat the measurements of piezometer head and both water depths, upstream and downstream of the sluice gate, as previously explained. Afterwards, measure the channel width using a metallic ruler. Finally, ask the teaching assistant for the piezometer reading corresponding to the bottom of the channel in order to establish the zero reading of the piezometers. This concludes the procedures of this experiment. Startup of the apparatus for the teaching assistant. First, make sure that the main valve of the apparatus is closed by checking that it does not turn in the counterclockwise direction. Make sure that there is enough water in the apparatus reservoir. Otherwise, add water using the water hose in the vicinity if necessary. Roughly, a 10 cm vertical distance should separate the bottom of the V-notch weir and the water level in the lower section of the discharge reservoir as shown. Afterwards, raise the upstream gate all the way up. The following procedures explain how to determine the zero reading of the piezometer. First, raise the downstream gate about 8 centimeters. Then, start the pump. Adjust the flow rate using the valve in such a way that the flow depth in the channel is about 10 centimeters. Wait until the flow depth is steady and is level. Now, remove the air bubbles from all the piezometers connected to the bottom of the channel using the air hose. Ensure that all piezometer readings for the taps at the bottom of the channel are the same. Select one of the taps of the channel and install the point gauge directly above it. Measure the flow depth at this location. After this, record the respective piezometer readings for the selected tap using the sliding ruler. Now, subtract the reading from the point gauge from the piezometer reading to obtain the zero reading corresponding to the channel bottom. We will now continue with the procedures related to the startup of the apparatus. Lower the downstream gate completely. Next, lower the upstream sluice gate to the opening of the first run specified in the lab manual. At the same time, adjust the flow using the valve in such a way that the water backs up behind the gate to a height at least 35 centimeters over the channel bottom. It is important to make sure that the level is steady over each gate opening run. Next, install the point gauge mount on top of the channel at approximately 30 centimeters downstream of the sluice gate. Now that there is water impounded behind the sluice gate, remove air bubbles from the piezometer tubes connected to the gate using the air hose as shown previously. The apparatus is now ready for use by the students. The following procedures are for the shutdown of the apparatus by the teaching assistant. Close the main valve slowly by turning it clockwise. Then, turn off the apparatus pump. This concludes the procedures for shutting down the apparatus.